estate, to me, is the gateway to financial freedom that anyone can access. Because even if you're not VA, or if you don't have the VA loan, you can still have low down payment loans that allow you to buy a real asset, which when you look at it in the historical context, if you zoom out on any map, you can you can point and cherry pick like the crashes, but over time it's appreciated.
Welcome back to Auxano, where we discuss our guests' causes of growth or their causes of change. Today I'm with an awesome soul. He is really advanced in the ways of real estate and just in business in general. And I hope that you guys will like today's episode. I think even myself, I will try to ask questions that challenges the audience, because I do think that life is too short to not get after it, not get after what you want. But without further ado, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, my name's Leland. So currently, I'm a grad school student at William & Mary, but I also work full-time as a real estate agent, really into the overall startup space. But backing it up a little bit, I was a naval officer for 5 years, did ROTC out of Virginia Tech, mostly because I didn't really know what I wanted to do in life. My grandpa did Navy, 30 years. He enlisted from the Philippines. And so, his whole mentality was, I want to create a better life for myself, move to America. Yeah. He did 30 years in the Navy. Dad kind of followed in his footsteps. When it was time for me to start getting serious about a job, was looking into options and did ROTC through Virginia Tech.
I feel like it's a point of pride for a lot of Filipinos to join the military. Like it's usually like you're a nurse or a doctor.
Yeah.
Or you're a lawyer or an engineer. But like the most common thing that I've heard is like, oh yeah, I'm in the Navy.
Right.
I think it's a point of pride for American history, not even just Filipino history, but for American history, that just because like America is that melting pot of cultures. I'm really proud that Filipinos are in that culture, especially since a lot of Filipinos have a lot of heart and a lot of passion. So super dope. I mean, I was a hospital corpsman in the Navy. Always enjoy talking to people who have been in the service and just learning their experiences. But it's not every day that a fellow veteran comes on and is in the business world and wants to be on the podcast. So
definitely. A question I get a lot is, why did I get out of the Navy? Why did you get out?
Ooh, I got better. I'm going to tell maybe a super personal / bitter story. Yeah. So during the height of COVID, they sent me to New York, and right after, I literally just got off of like naval police duty, or as you know, like ASF, Auxiliary Security Force. So here I am guarding these nukes, thinking like I hate my life, like this is ridiculous, like these 16-hour shifts. And then right after, I'm like, oh, okay, like I get to go back to work at the hospital, or I get to see patients, or actually at the time, there was like rumors that like our people in our command was chosen by a platform to go to Afghanistan. Okay. So I was like, whoa, like let's go, like I'm gonna get some. Yeah. But they sent me to New York instead during the height of COVID, and it was awesome because I got to become the vaccination supervisor. I was working really, 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 really hard just to pick up third class. Mm-hmm. And so maybe as an officer, you might not relate, but I was working like a dog day and night, like color guard coordinator, ASF, going to school, while still investing in real estate to try to prove that like I'm worthy of third class. And I looked at the pay chart and I was like, I was working like a dog to make an extra $100 like a month. So when I looked at that, I think something broke.
Like the input you were putting in, wasn't equivalent to that output.
Yeah, something broke inside, and actually I had a conversation with my XO. Okay. And my senior chief, and I asked them, what am I doing wrong? And they're like, you're not doing anything wrong. You just have to wait in line. And I think that was like the head breaking moment where I was
Yeah.
like, nothing wrong. Wait in line.
Yeah.
Wait in line for what? And that's when I doubled down on real estate and stuff. And it was just the fact that my real estate investments were, they what do you call it? They replaced the E3 income already.
Yeah.
And E3 income is like maybe 900, like biweekly, so 1,800 a month.
Right.
And I was like, oh, okay, screw this. Like, I'm leaving the military. I'm gonna go chase the greener pastures. But that's
Yeah.
why I left. Was just I felt like all the time that I was sitting in a room complaining like I could do something more. Now I feel like I am doing something more.
Yeah, in hindsight, I can definitely reflect that, the Navy was really a big part of my formative years and, how I want to be as a leader.
Yeah.
And overall, similar reasons to why I ended up getting out.
Yeah.
When it came down to it, you can't really control your schedule. Like, you can have certain things planned out, but if the ship needs to get underway, it needs to be out there doing the mission. And so, similar story. It's interesting that you said that you started getting into real estate while you were in the Navy as well, because, very similar in my case. I saw one of my friends bought a house, and he told me about this whole house hacking thing. It was very new to me at the time. Mm-hmm. And, went over to his place, saw that he had 2 roommates. I was like, wow, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
You're giving them a place to live, lower than the average market rent, and you're also getting your mortgage paid for you. That's when the light bulb kind of went off for me, and I realized, in the military you have this VA loan. That lowers the barrier to entry because, growing up I always thought you got to put 20% down to buy a house, right? And, that completely changed when you get those military benefits and you can put 0 down on a house as long as you can afford it. That gives you a lot more leverage than that person who has to put 20% down.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of people I think that need more education, especially in the military. Like, they need more education on what benefits they actually have.
Right.
And I think you'd agree with me on this, to where you don't have to get out of the military to use all the benefits.
Right.
If you did enough research and put time spent on real estate research alone, by the time you get out of the military, assuming you only do 4 or 5 years, you could potentially have at least 1 house. And especially if you house hack, maybe not in this timeline currently, but it wasn't out of the question to buy a house at year 1 and then year 5 refinance, or maybe even sell, and then to avoid capital gains, to put that first property into another one. And yeah, I just think that a lot of people should do more research.
Yeah, and it becomes kind of like a compounding cycle. You know,
Yeah.
the VA loan, has an allotment, and if you buy that first house and you still have some of that allotment left over, you can move out, make that one a rental, and then use 0 down again.
It's literally what I did.
House.
That's what I did
Right.
that was my strategy. I'm just so inherently lazy that it was easier for me to like buy a dumpy and just like fix it up, like sweat equity, put some money into it, go to like these wholesaling granite countertop vendors, renovate the kitchen myself. Maybe not put the granite countertops in myself, but negotiating contracting costs of like putting hardwood floors in versus putting in carpet. And it's been one of the things that has actually yielded very high rents on mine.
Yeah, that touches on an interesting point, because real estate isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. Like, everyone thinks about it as kind of like this, you need to cash flow. But in your case, you were banking on that appreciation after putting in some work.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that appreciation over time gives you more equity in the house. And you can rent that out and cash flow. People think about real estate as passive, and in your case, it probably didn't feel that way when you were putting in all that sweat equity.
Yeah, definitely not. But it's passive now.
Yeah.
After all that,
You can get the systems in place, you know, but that upfront work is what it took to get it passive.
Yeah, I agree. Let's footnote this, and let's come back to it.
Yeah.
I always play the Let's Get Deep game with my guests.
Okay.
So that's what we're gonna move right along into. Granted, I guess we could have skipped this and just like had the entire conversation on real estate, but this is to kind of pivot just from real estate for a little bit. That's going to be the main topic of conversation for sure.
Cool. So how does this work?
We start off with level 1 to 3. Level 1 is icebreaker. Level 2 is deep. Level 3 is deeper. You pick one of the 2 cards to answer.
Let's go top right.
Okay.
What is your ideal room temperature? It's got to be a brisk 68 degrees.
Okay.
Got to have that AC blasting.
You're a polar bear.
Yeah.
Makes
I'd
sense.
rather be like bundled up and, you know, have to take off layers than be sweating, if that makes sense.
It does.
And then, especially when I'm sleeping, you know, bundled up in that weighted blanket, 68 degrees.
68.
It's got to be chilly.
Dang. All right. Level 2.
All right,
Deep.
let's go.
That one?
This one. What is the best birthday gift you've ever received? All right, this is interesting because nowadays I don't ask for birthday presents. Like, if my family asks me what they want me to get or what they want to get me, I just tell them don't get me anything, and I tell them to just invest that money instead. But if I think about the best birthday gift, recently my girlfriend got me one of those seltzer, like it has like the CO2 built into it, and you can make your own seltzer water.
Oh, that's super cool.
So it's like, you know, instead of buying those 12 packs, you can just make your own.
Oh, okay. How much was it?
I don't know, actually.
Because I would imagine that, I mean, especially since you're of the investing mindset, I would also imagine that in some regards, like you're also pretty frugal in things that you don't really care about. So if you're like buying seltzer water all the time, you're probably looking at this like, what a return of investment, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say I'm frugal, but I make sure I allocate my money to things that are going to make me return, and then I have my own money set aside to kind of just spend and enjoy. I'm not like, you know, save, you know, penny pinching when it comes to, you know, just keeping cash in hand. I like to allocate that money to investments, whether it's real estate, stock.
Yeah.
And because that's something I didn't really know about growing up. You know, I was always taught to, like, save my money. I remember when I first was in the Navy, I was actually living at home the first year because...
Wow, that's super cool.
Yeah, because I was going on so many underways, and I had a deployment coming up, so it didn't make any sense to go out and get a lease or rent something. Or, you know, at the time, I didn't even have the mentality of buying a home. But that, you know, allowed me to save up for when I got back. But I actually had, to get back to the point, I had all my money in a certificate of deposit. It was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to make 1.5% in a year. And that's just to kind of show the mentality that I had initially is like, all right, I'm going to save all this money. And then I started realizing I needed to make my money work for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree in the fact that I think a lot of Filipinos are fans of, like, just save.
Right.
It's like, sir, ma'am, sir.
Yeah.
You know,
That's, like, built into our culture.
Yeah.
You know? Like, consistent jobs and saving. Like, risk-taking isn't really built into it.
Before we move on to deeper, I wanted to ask, how does your family look at the business side? Like, are they like, no, you should have stayed 20 years. What's wrong with you?
So, yeah, I mean, my grandpa did 30 years. My dad did 30 years. That was always, like, a big point of contention in my head.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I need to, because my grandpa made Master Chief. My dad made captain
man.
06. I was getting out as a 03. And so, you know, the expectation was kind of like, all right, if my dad made captain, my grandpa made master chief, I've got to make admiral now. So I really, it was kind of a point of contention initially where there's just like, you know, what are you going to do afterwards? But then I kind of just started showing like, hey, this is what I'm truly passionate about, you know, pursuing business, creating value. And, you know, overall, they started to see that, you know, I was being serious.
It was probably working out better, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well.
All right. Last one you pick.
Moving right along to deeper. All right. I'll just continue the trend.
Do you have any beliefs that significantly changed over time? We already kind of touched on it, but it was really that saving mentality. You know, if you just save your money, it's losing its value every year due to inflation. You know, if it's just sitting in that checking account. So, you know, growing up, it was just like, you know, you got to save. You got to, you know, save to be able to buy a house. And then, you know, over time I learned about leveraging your money. And that was kind of like the light bulb going off. Everybody kind of has like a light bulb moment when you think about, you know, like a certain book or a certain podcast that you read. You know, a lot of people say like Rich Dad, Poor Dad is their favorite book. My kind of light bulb moment was a podcast that I listened to, and I don't even really listen to Joe Rogan, but he had a particular guest on at the time. His name was Naval Ravikant. And so
yeah, I think I've seen that episode actually. Yeah.
That was kind of like my light bulb moment of like, this is a modern day philosopher, because, you know, you think of like Aristotle, Socrates, when you think of philosophers, you don't really think of anyone who's like a modern day philosopher. But when I listened to what he was teaching, essentially he basically says that, you know, there's different pillars that you need to focus on. You know, that's you want to be healthy, you want to be financially free, and then that allows you to pursue your own passions. Because if you think about it, if you're working kind of like a salary job, you're dependent on that salary each month, whether you like it or not. But if you have a steady source of income, you know, like in your case with passive income from real estate, you can start pursuing other things, not just because you have to, in the sense of, you know, living to work, but you can actually start pursuing those things that you enjoy and that you like. You know, this media company.
Yeah, you know, so when we first met, we were at the 757 Startup Studios, and I was at the workshop. It was that point in time where I told myself that I have enough real estate investments that I have quote-unquote fuck you money for corporate America, where, like, I don't have to, because I declined multiple six-figure salaries. They were, like, in sales, talent acquisition, whatever, right? Business development. And I declined those jobs to give this a shot, because I also looked up the statistic that when a company is starting to lose money, their talent acquisition, their sales department, or their business development, those are like the first to go because they're losing money. And so in my mind, it was definitely like it was back to the point of contention with the military, was do I stay for stability or do I leave for exposition and go on an adventure and find a way that I can work in my ikigai, if you know what that is.
Yeah. I saw something recently on social media, like it's the Japanese word for purpose or like passion.
Yeah. Yeah, and with the military for sure, I'm proud. Like the paddle that I got from my command for my going away is like the treasure that I have. Like I can give you all my medals, all my coins, everything, and all I ever really wanted was the paddle and to pick up like the next rank up, because I knew that like by year 2 of the military, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad actually when I was like really young. I think I read it when I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
Just because I mean, being Filipino and being a first generation American, right? Like you grow up pretty poor. Eggs are expensive. You usually eat like maybe just a bunch of rice.
You use the leftover whipped cream Tupperware for leftover food.
You know what's kind of crazy is my mom still does that.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, Mom, stop. Like, we don't need to do this anymore.
You need to get her some Tupperware for Christmas or something.
So we have Tupperware. We have glass Tupperware.
Okay.
It's crazy. We have glass Tupperware. And I think in her mind, it's literally just like this hoarding mentality because they didn't have a lot growing up. Mm. And so now because they didn't have a lot growing up, they have to keep everything. And it's like, all right, this is erring on the side of hoarding and wastefulness because do you shop at Asian markets all the time?
I don't actually. I need to more. Yeah, the only thing I really make in terms of we're going down a good rabbit hole here of Filipino food, but the only thing I make is like adobo.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty easy.
Very easy.
Yeah, but I don't really shop at the Asian markets.
I gotcha.
Do you have any like Filipino traditions that you want to pass down? You want to make a part of your life for, next generation?
Yeah, I think so. I can still understand Tagalog.
Okay.
Now, granted, I can also speak it maybe at like a middle school level. If you start talking about life philosophy or metaphysical concepts or maybe even like concepts about like religion or like life and death, you're probably gonna lose me at about like 5 minutes in.
I mean, that's a hard topic even in English. Like
it is, but it's stuff I enjoy. Like the entire podcast is essentially centered almost on that.
See, I wish I could speak Tagalog. So my grandparents, both sides, they didn't teach my mom or my dad because when they moved over here, they didn't want them to have, like, their mentality was that if they were, learning Tagalog, they would have a harder time integrating with, American culture and assimilating overall. And I wish they knew it so I could know it.
I agree with you in the fact that, so the only reason I even learned Tagalog was because my grandmother had such a heavy accent. She called a couch a cow consistently. Like, she'd be like, oh, like, yung cow. And I'm like, that's a couch, Grandma. Like, what are you talking about? And so the only reason I even learned Tagalog, one, because I was getting yelled at in Tagalog, and in our tribe dialect, Ilocano.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, like, I learned Tagalog because that's how it was spoken in the house often because we were a 3-generation household. So I would like to be able to speak Tagalog to my future kids, but it also depends on if I marry like a Filipino woman or if she's, because I can also speak a little bit of Mandarin, and if I happen to marry a Chinese woman, I wouldn't mind speaking Mandarin in the household either.
I feel like that's a good language to know for the future, like with how things are going.
It's definitely. I agree. It's definitely Spanish on top, and then Mandarin's actually right under it. It's not any other language. So there was a period of time where like my older sister and my older brother were just like, they were patronizing me. It's like, why would you learn Mandarin? Like, why would you learn Chinese?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, well, like, I don't know. I did it to impress a girl. Her name was Esther Shen. Never gonna forget about her. Never didn't work out in the end.
Esther, if you're listening to this, you gotta DM my boy.
But yeah, I learned Chinese to try to impress a girl.
Okay.
Didn't work out. I can still order at like restaurants and stuff because I was in the class for like 3 years or so. Gotcha. But yeah, I totally forgot it. So that's something I would want to pass down is language, our cultural values in general of like being family oriented. But
you grew up in California?
I did.
Okay.
I did. You did too, right?
I was born there. In Monterey.
Gotcha.
When my dad was in Naval Postgraduate School, but I grew up mostly here, between here and Hawaii.
Okay.
So lived in Hawaii for 2 years when I was in preschool, and then 2 years when I was in middle school. So like total of 4 years.
Because it was military.
Yeah, exactly.
So makes sense. Yeah, I was born and raised in San Diego.
Okay.
San Diego. Well, I say San Diego, but like we moved around, but that's the central area.
That was probably a different experience because there's a lot more of a Asian presence over there.
Definitely. I do like Virginia though because it's slower pace of life.
Okay.
But it was kind of funny because when I got to my first command, it was literally just I was the only Asian person like within a 30, 40-mile radius. I mean, I exaggerate, but that's all I could see. I was like, oh wow, like these guys are like 6'5" and like.
See, it was different for me here because in Virginia, you know, was always the minority, and then moving over to Hawaii, that was such a weird change where like everyone was either Pacific Islander or Asian.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it's kind of like a weird mentality change.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pivot the point back to real estate if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just because I think it'd be a waste if the people listening didn't have that knowledge, especially if they're like, what is real estate? So what? Let me backtrack. Actually, what would you say to somebody who is a naysayer about real estate? So in my personal defense, I would say that it is a hedge against inflation. It creates generational wealth, and you are able to use it as leverage later on. That's what I would say to them. What would you say?
I would say that exact same thing. You took the words out of my mouth.
Oh, wow.
No,
Okay.
but so essentially, real estate to me is the gateway to financial freedom that anyone can access. Because even if you're not VA, or if you don't have the VA loan, you can still have low down payment loans that allow you to buy a real asset, which when you look at it in the historical context, you know, if you zoom out on any map, you can, you know, you can point and cherry pick like the crashes, but over time, it's appreciated. You know, the S&P, you know, the if you look at it on any 10-year scale, on average, it appreciates by about 7%. You know, real estate is up there as well when it comes to if you zoom out on any scale. Like, I remember when I bought back in my first house back in 2019, people were saying, you know, we're close to those 2008 levels again. Like, are you sure you want to buy?
Right.
It was kind of like that tone was in the atmosphere still. Like, you know, are you sure the market's not going to crash? We're back at those historic highs. But, you know, I didn't really have any other choice. I could either rent or buy. And so ended up getting this house, and just 2 years later ended up appreciating by about 35%.
Insane.
So, you know, there's not any other asset that has this level of scarcity that over time appreciates at the historic level that it does. And, you know, if you look back, the, you know, best time to buy was 10 years ago, right?
Right.
If you're looking at any type of asset. But the second best time to buy is today. So you can look at anything over the historic context and kind of see that appreciation. Like, can we just pull up a graph here in this part of the pod?
Yeah.
But yeah. So other than it being a good asset, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Like, you can do long-term rentals, you can do short-term rentals, you can do, you know, what you did. You can put work into it and have it appreciate. There's so many different options when it comes to real estate. It's not just this one thing. And so that's why I like it a lot, because I've had experience doing long-term rentals, short-term. Short-term rentals are actually, it's my favorite to manage overall because I manage my own properties as well.
Wow.
Yeah, it's, for me, the cash flow there's a little bit more upfront cost. So, you got to buy the furniture, you got to get the aesthetic right for it, for people to book it. There's different fees that platforms like Airbnb take, but it's very rewarding overall. And I think the best part about it is that anyone can get into it. There's the FHA loan where you can only put down 3.5%. There's conventional loans where you can put down as low as 5. But I would recommend, I think anyone in the military has the opportunity to set themselves up financially if they're smart about the assets they're purchasing. And
I agree.
Real estate is just one of them.
I agree. I mean, any military listeners, especially if they're young, guys, eat at the mess. Don't go out drinking every weekend or every day. Like, I've met some people where it's like, you drinking tonight? No, sir, no. It's expensive. And especially when it comes to real estate, there's just so many avenues. I kind of want to debate you, actually, on this topic.
Definitely.
So I think that buy and holds single family and multifamily is superior compared to Airbnbs. Like, I know that Airbnbs have, like, there's potential. Like, you're probably able to charge between 90 to, like, let's say 300 on that scale. Like, if there's a party, if there's I don't know what amusement parks are close by, but I know that, like, this part of Virginia has Busch Gardens, and then whatever, like, amusement park is on the side of the water. But I just think that buy and holds, single family and multifamily, like, they're just superior.
I think it just goes back to the whole, it's not a one-size-fits-all type of deal. Like, you wouldn't want to do an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere where there's not attractions around, there's not travel nurse presence or military presence.
Right.
And so I would agree with you that in certain areas, buy and hold single family is the way to go. But there's going to be opportunities based off of the, local area that make short-term rental superior in certain areas.
Yeah.
I think certain spots in Norfolk are, it is superior to have Airbnbs, like the Ghent area.
Yeah.
That's where my Airbnb is.
Oh, nice.
There's different rules and regulations too. Like, some cities don't allow it. They're cracking down on it.
Yeah.
So, if it comes to stability, single family, buy and hold, long-term rental, if you want to have that stability, then that's the way to go. But if you want more
superior cash flow.
Yeah, if you want cash flow, it's a little bit more high risk, but you just got to know the rules and regulations of the specific area.
Yeah.
You got to have systems in place. Like, you have to have a reliable cleaner.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, if you do have multiple long-term rentals, just go and try and either make one of them a short-term rental or make the next one a short-term rental, because you can always switch it back.
Yeah,
there's nothing preventing you from, taking that furniture out. And sometimes people will want to have the furniture if it's like a mid-term rental situation. But yeah, you can always switch it back, and so it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all type of deal.
Yeah. I'd agree. It was kind of to play the devil's advocate, I think, because I guess it just depends on the amount of content that you consume. Also, you have, like, the Graham Steffans or the Robert Kiyosaki's of the world, and then you also have, like, the Dave Ramsey's of the world, where they're like, you just need to pay this in cash.
Yeah,
it's like, sir, I don't think I can.
I wanted to talk about this a little bit later, but that's a good segue to there. So I wanted to talk about some of, like, the cliches that are out there.
Go for it. Go for it now.
Yeah. So, I mean, you always hear about certain things on social media in, like, certain sound bites.
Yeah.
But it's not, they never cover the full story of
Never do.
what it actually means. And
Yeah.
and so I have a couple written down. This was like the only prep I did. But all right, so
Which is funny because this is a free-flowing podcast.
yeah.
But I love it. I
Yeah.
think this is super important too because, like, when it comes to information, if it's not sound, this would just be another sound bite where they said it, I'm gonna go do it, and then that's one person negatively influenced. So
You see, so one of them is like developing good habits. Like, you see these cliches of people's schedules. You know, I think of like Mark Wahlberg's schedule when like people will post their
3
schedule.
a.m.
Right.
club.
Yeah. Wake up 3 a.m. Workout, pray, eat, work out again. Like, so yeah, I mean, really developing good habits isn't necessarily the message that I think that needs to be conveyed to people. It's more about putting forcing functions into your life that allow you to be consistent.
Yeah.
And so by forcing function, I mean something that makes you do something that you wouldn't do on your own. So an example for me, if I'm truly trying to learn something, I have to be in the classroom setting. And so I look at being in the classroom setting as a forcing function for actually learning. So, for example, for my real estate test, there was the option to do it online or in person. And, you know, the online one, it was kind of go at your own pace. But I elected to do the in-person one because, you know, I not only knew that I would be able to pay attention better, but there's a forcing function to get that completed in 1 week instead of spreading it out across a couple months. So when it comes to developing good habits, you kind of have to do some introspection, and you have to realize, like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? For your weaknesses, develop those forcing functions that make you be better.
I love that you have like that you like coined that term, forcing functions. That's definitely something I'm going to take away. Mine is actually MINS. It's a mnemonic for, like, MINS would be MINS.
Okay.
Most important next step. And
Okay.
that's something that I attribute to real estate specifically is where it was born out of. I think I heard it on Bigger Pockets somewhere, like Brandon Turner or something. But that's helped develop a rudimentary system when investing, not just in real estate, but everything else. So I love how you have like a power phrase, so to speak, where it's like, yeah, like this is what it is.
Right. Because we're inherently lazy.
We are.
Or at least I am.
I mean, I literally just said I am inherently lazy. That's why I'm working so hard.
Yeah. The next one, the other cliche that I hear all the time is, you know, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? And so the reason why I think that conveys the wrong message is because you're not always spending time with people. It has to do more about the information you're consuming and overall sphere of influence. Like, your sphere of influence isn't just the people you hang around. And so when people kind of say that cliche, I think it goes more to the social media accounts you follow, the podcasts you're listening to, the news outlets you're listening to.
Yeah.
Because in that sphere of friends, you know, of course, they're going to have an influence on you overall. But, you know, you're not always with them. More time is honestly spent, at least for me, in solidarity, where I'm just trying to consume my own, like, grow my own knowledge base. And so I'll give an example, like, when it comes to sphere of influence, like, if every day on your commute you're listening to music, you know, nothing wrong with listening to music. It's always good to get, like, pumped up in the morning, blasting your favorite songs. But if you're allocating more of that time to growing your knowledge base, listening to, like, an audiobook, then that has more of an effect than, you know, the 5 people you're spending time with. And so that's kind of one of those cliches that I hear is, like, you know, 5 people you hang out with most, like, your network is your net worth. I think it has more to do with the overall sphere, and by sphere I mean, like, the information you're consuming as well.
Yeah, I think it takes a village. Like, and if you're, well, I mean, to be fair, if your entire village is the 5 people, then yeah, you probably, like, if you're hanging out with 5 bums, you're probably going to be the 6th bum.
Yeah.
But that's only if your entire village is those 5 people. If you're being nurtured, grown in different gardens, planting seeds in podcasts and in YouTube's audiobook. Yeah, like I believe that you become the modicum of media you consume or the modicum of education.
I think it's also super important to consume both sides of, like, you know, don't always look for things that, you know, have confirmation bias in what you already believe. Like, you got to purposely seek out other media outlets. Like, you know, if you're normally listening to, you know, left-wing media, you got to purposely seek out what the other half is saying, because the truth is often where that middle converges.
You might laugh at me, but there's definitely been time where I was like just maybe like my first year of college for sure, where I was like just consuming red pill content, and they're like, you know, like she left you, so she didn't bet on you.
I know a lot of people like that just, you know, get consumed with one side, and they make that their overall
personality. And so, yeah, like, I'd be one of those boneheads that I was like, yeah, you guys are right. Like, oh my God, yeah, like, this is true. This is fact. So I wholeheartedly agree that you should develop both so that you can
guest
create your...
on the pod, Andrew Tate.
No, yeah. Who knows? You know, it'd be interesting to learn from him, because I do think that he's not like the masculine role model I would follow, but I do think he's a marketing genius. Same thing with like Jake Paul, Logan. Like the Pauls, I think marketing geniuses.
You have to. I think they do well in marketing, but for the wrong reasons. You know, like, I don't know if I could completely like go branded in that direction. Just for the sake of getting followers.
Yeah, I not me either. But I'm also a fan of like, this might be a personal question, but you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I think, in my opinion, that a 5 million net worth over lifetime is enough for me. So like, because I think a 5 million net worth over the span of like, if you put it into stocks, real estate in the portfolio, I think it's if you take it out of an IRA, like let's say we're 30 and we have $5 million in net worth, I think you can take out about 7% of your total net worth, and that would maybe yield you with a salary of like 60 or 70K every year.
Yeah.
I think that's enough for me, but that's because I don't have expensive taste. I know that there are a lot of people in the world who are like that. I know Jack Selby from the Iced Coffee Hour. He's like, if you know who he is. From Graham Stephan. He went on to Caleb Hammer's show, Financial Audit, which I would love to be on. That'd be super dope one day. And he said the same thing, where he's like, yeah, like, I drive a 2003 Mazda Miata and like a 2005 Lexus like RX 330. And I was like, dude, those cars are easily below the 10K threshold. I drive a Honda Civic. I have a little rice racer.
You have it souped up?
Not really. I just have a spoiler and like racing wheels. It's like SI wheels. So, but I didn't change the interior of it whatsoever. I just wanted a more of an aesthetic ride. But even all the modifications, quote unquote, I made on it is less than 10K.
Okay.
So, yeah, like, I mean, I kind of rambled.
I think that's fair. Like, you know, 5 million.
5 million.
Just for a single person.
I'm saying 5 million for even a family.
Family?
Yeah, okay. That's me. That's me, at least.
I think it also depends, like, you know, if you want to have influence, like, do philanthropy, you know, I don't think there's any need to go further than 5 million if you're living within your means. I think overall most people get their net worth from, you know, their assets and their companies.
Yeah.
You know, 90% of millionaires are made through real estate. Almost 99% of billionaires are made through companies and like creating value.
Yeah.
I think it's not so much as a focus on that monetary value, that, in my opinion, it's more of like, if you create value for society, then, you know, that money will be kind of like a secondary thing. Like, you know, the second and third order effects of creating value overall for society will get you to that point, you know, regardless of what you're doing.
So I am a fan. I was a fan of Dave Ramsey for the longest time to get out of debt. But once I realized that leverage is one of the best ways to advance wealth, it increased my risk threshold.
I think the biggest thing with Dave Ramsey is he gives great advice for people that have zero baseline of, you know, financial education,
structure,
which is a good thing, because some people need that. People need that structure to get to the point where they can kind of graduate that school of thought and then go beyond that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, he's very, you know, no debt.
Yeah. No credit cards.
Right.
No
credit
leverage.
Cards. But, you know, leverage can be a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that there's enough pods and audiobooks on how, like, you know, there's good debt, bad debt.
Yeah.
You know, and you can leverage that to continue that compounding. And he really just appeals for those people that have that zero baseline.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's an important kind of layer to be able to have that resource to go to him.
Yeah.
Like, for those people who have, you know, college debt, who, you know, are maxed out on their credit cards. But I think at a certain point, you have to graduate beyond that school of thought.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. Just because, so even with like the first property that I had, I think I had, so I wanted to pay off my Civic early. It's a 2008 Honda Civic. I bought it for like $6,000. But I didn't put any down on it. I was like fresh out of A school, bought a car. But I knew that I wanted to buy something that was cheaper than $10,000. So I bought the Civic. But because I was also in A school, I incurred some credit card debt. Now, it wasn't a crazy amount. I think it was maybe $4,000 or $5,000. Either way, that's still a lot for like a period of being a hospital corpsman or a combat medic for 6 months to accrue that much in credit card debt. So on top of me working active duty in the military, I was working full-time at a Pokeball shop.
Okay.
So I was working 60, 70-hour weeks just to pay off the debt, but to also make enough so that I could also have money to invest. And I do agree that it definitely depends on the school of thought that you're in. Like, I mean, life is in seasons, right? So if you're in this constant season of debt, like, yeah, probably like Graham Stephan and using leverage positions is probably not the information you want to be listening to.
I think some people need to actually go through that experience to realize the importance of money.
Yeah.
You know, there's some people that can read about it, you know, listen to a podcast about it and realize, like, hey, this is the way this is the direction I want to move in. But some people actually need to experience the other side of it when it comes to, you know, being in debt to get out of that. And so it's just different learning styles.
Yeah.
The other cliche, we were kind of touching on it already, but passive income, you know, when it comes to real estate, it's not fully passive. You know, some people just think like, oh,
100%
I'm going to invest, I'm going to set it and forget it, and I'm going to cash flow. But, you know, what happens when that HVAC breaks when you're on vacation and, you know, a tenant's calling you, you're coordinating, like, the emergency repairs for it.
Yeah.
You're out of pocket, like, $8,000 for a new HVAC. You can have certain systems in place to get it as passive as possible. But, you know, the point I'm trying to make with this is you either have to put in a lot of work to get to that point and have the systems in place to make it as passive as possible. But it's never going to be 100%, you know, cash flow each month, set it and forget it.
Originally, that's what I thought too. And I was met with a bitter hit. But I'm also a fan of saving because the tenant is essentially promoting your generational wealth. I did the exact same thing to where I was saving for anything. And my property manager, I don't manage my own properties. My property manager called me like late into the night and was like, "Hey, like the washer and the dryer, it pooped on itself."
Yeah.
So I was like, "Yeah, fix it." He's like, "What do you mean? Like it's gonna be like about like $1,000, $2,000." I was like, "Yeah, I saved for it, so just fix it, like get it done."
Yeah, you had that nest egg or like that base layer in place to make sure, if something did arise.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize that they need to have a certain amount saved up. They need to have these systems in place to get it to be passive.
Yeah.
And then, some of those like property managers will cut into your profit margins, but if your mortgage is low enough, then I definitely recommend it. But I'm at the point where I like being more hands-on with the properties. Like I like screening the tenants before they move in. There might be a point where I'm just outsourcing it, but at this point in time, with 4 rentals, it's easily manageable.
Nice. Yeah, I agree.
Let's see, what else did I have in here? I think we touched on a lot of the things already when it comes to
The cliches.
yeah,
Okay.
some assets being better than others.
I gotcha.
But as far as your next steps in real estate, where do you see that going?
So what's funny about that is I started the media company because I was reminded of like standing post. I was reminded of like chopping fish at the Poke Bowl restaurant.
Yeah.
And I realized like what was I doing it for? So to circle back to the point to where you were saying that 90% of multimillionaires are made through real estate. But did you say like 80% of billionaires are made through companies?
It's like 99% of billionaires
are made through companies.
Yeah.
So it was,
or those companies being passed down like from their families.
So it was that hopeful wish of like, okay, if I can make even a 6-figure agency, I don't ever have to work a normal job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not assuming that I decided to stay single forever and live like a NEET or a hikikomori and play video games all day, I wouldn't have to work. But I don't want to live that life. Like I want kids, I want a family. I want to be outrageously generous and be philanthropic. Take care of my mom and dad, like buy them an even bigger house, so to speak. So I'm definitely at that point to where am I chasing wealth or am I chasing purpose? And it was that concept of ikigai. So I'm giving the media company a good shot before I go back to maybe a corporate position. Because don't get me wrong, like even starting this venture, I actually had already gotten approved for the vet tech program.
Okay.
And the vet tech program essentially guarantees you a spot to become a software engineer, a web developer. Like those are high salaries. And that's something that I was definitely considering was like let's just scrap the business. Like let's just scrap all this and then just work and then acquire more real estate. But then it would betray the ideology that I have of pursuing purpose. So real estate is still my main squeeze for sure. Like it is the first love that I've had because we didn't have a home growing up and stuff. We were always in transient housing. But me and my brothers actually fumbled an apartment deal in LA. It was
you were under contract and then something happened? Or?
No, because it was going to be a private sale. But we just didn't have enough money and we didn't have enough leverage. So
Gotcha.
That's why I was like, dang, like if only I had more leverage, if I had more knowledge and education. So my 3 properties could have easily become 9 or 8. And it's that mentality though too, where it's like, all right, like I have to sacrifice one thing to pursue another. And in this case, since I'm still super young, I decided to sacrifice this, I think, the never-ending chase for more acquisition of real estate to start a media company. So I'd like to throw the question back at you. What comes next for your real estate ventures?
Well, I'm in the incubator for startup studios.
Yeah.
And so next steps are really, so when I came into the Navy, I was ready to make changes. Like, I was like, I'm going to change the Navy for the better. That ended up being a lot harder than I realized, or that I thought initially. And, ultimately ended up in me wanting to get out to be able to control my time and, have an input and have an equivalent output when it comes to the work I was putting in. So when I got into the real estate space, I started noticing a lot of inefficiencies in the way things were being conducted. And so to answer your question, the company I'm building in Startup Studios is going to help improve on a lot of the transactional inefficiencies that we have in real estate. And it's going to make it easier for people to buy homes.
I know that the 757 Startup Studios is, like, you could have it just based off ideation.
Yeah.
But when your stuff's out there and when you give, if you didn't give the company a name, so to speak, but when it's like product and it's out there to find out who the product market fit is, we'd love to be able to talk about it again.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I'll be ready to talk about, the company is called Vroom Brick. So like vroom, like fast, and brick, like the material that some houses are made out of.
Yeah.
But would definitely love to talk about that on another pod.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Actually, I did have that question for you. Is why not start your own real estate podcast? Is it in the works, or is it something you've considered?
To me, I think there's a lot of oversaturation in the real estate podcast market already. There's a lot of good resources out there.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't be able to do that justice. I'm more about like being boots on the ground, seeing the inefficiencies and trying to improve them through technology.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're on the right path to it, and it sounds like it's steadily creeping. And I wanted to ask a personal question.
Yeah.
Was there a point in time to where, because by trade you were a surface warfare officer in the Navy,
I was in the engineering department,
which I think is a pretty intense, kind of a headache of a job, because you're in charge of the boat. You literally carry the boat.
You really got 3 roles, and these are just kind of like the overarching ones. But as a division officer, you're running a division. So in my case, it was the electrical division.
Yeah.
So responsible for the generators on the ship and the electrical system that carried power to the vital components.
Yeah.
So you're a division officer. You're also a watch stander. So you got to stand your specific watches 2 times a day. And then you're also trying to get qualified to get your warfare pin. And so it is there's a lot of balance, especially when, you're on deployment. You also have this overarching mission on top of those smaller things that you're trying to contribute to the bigger picture. But
so with that being said too, because, I mean, they say that having a military background is the best. Was there ever a point to where you just saw that, like, this was the right direction? Like, you were just going to pivot into this and burn the boats, so to speak? Or are you at that point where you're like, you know what, there's no going back. Like, I can't join the military anymore. I'm just full sail on this.
I don't think there was necessarily, like, a light bulb moment in this case. Like, I was talking about earlier how there was a light bulb moment when I realized, like, everything I learned about finances was, not necessarily wrong, but not the most efficient.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't necessarily a light bulb moment when I wanted to transition out. It kind of happened over time. I think really it came down to rental income starting to replace salary.
Yeah.
And then
the classical tale.
Right. And then also a combination of just realizing that I wanted to create value for other people. And so the overall compass started to align when I started implementing some of those forcing functions I was talking about, and realizing that, you know, if I stick at this, if I stay consistent, I can actually change a system. Because, you know, we've been doing real estate transactions kind of the same way for a very long time.
Yeah.
You know, since the start of real estate, in America at least. And so that kind of compass started aligning as I started seeing things, being boots on the ground in the real estate space. And I realized I have the power to make change here, unlike, you know, in the Navy, where it's a lot more bureaucratic.
And you're like a cog. Yeah. What tips would you give a young entrepreneur, specifically trying to go into the Airbnb world, not just the real estate world?
Biggest thing is just having a bias towards action. You know, take that next step. If you want to do things, you gotta experiment. You also have to learn and expand your sphere of influence. Like, you want to get that Airbnb, you should be listening to podcasts about Airbnbs every day. You should be reading different resources from bigger pockets. You need to expand your knowledge, and you also need to get out there and start doing. Like, don't wait until you have that perfect knowledge set, or, you know, don't be waiting for that aha moment to occur. Just get out there and start doing it.
Yeah.
Learn from somebody. Go to someone that you know that has an Airbnb and say, hey, I can help you manage this. I just want to learn your systems. You know, I can do all the guest messaging for you.
It's a lot of
I
work.
can coordinate the cleanings, and learn from somebody who's already done it. Yeah, so, I mean, really, it's, if you want to start an Airbnb, start changing your sphere of influence, and then go out and do it. Just have a bias towards action.
Yeah, execution over thinking.
Yeah.
Analysis paralysis will definitely get you stumped.
And then, of course, you want to have money saved up as well. Like,
Yeah, let's not
Yeah.
forget the biggest
yeah,
elephant in the
the
room.
reality is, like, if you can save up, because depending on what avenue you go to buy the Airbnb, or if you're converting a property into an Airbnb, you're gonna need around $10,000 for furniture. That's the reality of it. Like, you know, start working your way up from the ground level. Try to help someone manage their Airbnb, and then you will have that knowledge
Yeah.
to do it on your own.
And 10,000 seems like a daunting task now, perhaps, depending on where you're at, right? But 10,000 is doable.
And it also depends. Like, if it's a one-bedroom apartment that you start off on, the costs are going to be, you know, half that. It just depends on kind of the layout, the style you want to do. And then, you know, I don't really agree with this strategy, but some people will do Airbnb arbitrage, where they will rent out a house, and then they will technically sublease it in an Airbnb agreement. So it's something you have to work out with the landlord. You tell the landlord, you know, you're going to get consistent rent. I'm going to take care of any, you know, damages. I'm going to be responsible for the overall house, but I would like to sublease it through Airbnb. And so that's the lower cost way to go about doing it instead of buying it.
Yeah.
Like, you go find something that is renting for $2,000 a month. You have the money saved up to furnish it, and then you go out and rent it out on Airbnb and try to profit. You know, so if you're accounting for, you know, just weekends being booked, you want it to be somewhere in like the 200 a night range, so you can profit around like 3,600 to 4,000, because you get to factor in those cleaning fees as well. Those go straight to you, and then you pay your cleaner.
Yeah.
So that would be the lower cost way to get into it if you have a lower amount of capital, the arbitrage method.
Yeah.
But I think the best way to start off though is just get your own house. If you have the means and the life situation to be able to rent out the rooms, I know that's not going to be for everyone. Some people have families. But I think if you're young, you're starting off, especially, for young military, young sailors, you get that house, you rent it out to people on your ship, and then you start compounding from there. But again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's other methods, like in any life situation where you can at least build a plan to start generating that quote-unquote passive income.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it all starts with the plan of action. And when you lead with intention, especially if real estate investing is the desired goal, just backtrack from the big picture and lead with intention that way. I don't think you'll ever go wrong. But unfortunately, we are hitting closing time pretty soon. Do you have any closing thoughts, comments, or any questions?
I'm just wondering how many filler words I use throughout this podcast.
I just use one right there. Does it matter?
Are you going to edit them out?
Probably not.
Yeah, no, I'm
Probably
just
not.
kidding. No, I mean, I think as far as closing remarks, I think we touched on a lot of good things. I don't want real estate to seem like it's like this easy thing. Not to kind of inflate what we've done, but just so people have a better reality of, if they're trying to get into it, there's the, the side that people show on social media, and then there's the behind the scenes work that you have to put in. And I think overall, anyone can do it is the biggest thing. If you're thinking about it, go out and experiment, get into the numbers, and take action. Anyone can start generating that passive income.
Yeah. I parrot that quote. Not that quote. I parrot your phrase because anybody can do it, but it's not hard. Anybody can do it, but it is hard. It's not an easy process to where you wake up one day and then you have this experience to where you understand all the knowledge. It's going to be a lot of trial and error. It's going to be a lot of saving money, but it's also going to be a lot of studying how you can leverage things. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But a certain size will fit everything that you're looking for. And I 100% believe that in all my heart, mind, that if you just decide what it is, what method that you want, just run with it. And then when you find some success, grant yourself the privilege to, because it is a privilege to be able to do this, grant yourself the privilege to move and pivot in certain ways, in certain aspects. I actually wanted to ask you a closing question. So I know that you have a startup, but have you ever considered opening up a consulting firm for real estate? Like not in the sense that what house should I buy, but there's a lot of there's Richard Garcia on Instagram. There's Bigger Pockets. I'm sure Brandon Turner, but I'm sure there are going to be companies, large companies, that need the opinion of somebody learned, boots on ground, to ask hey, would it make financial sense, or in your predictions, would buying this commercial property make sense? Is that something that you would want to do?
I think in a way, my startup is going to be somewhat of a consulting company. However, in the traditional sense, I think the direction I'm trying to go in with it is, overall democratizing the home buying process, making it available to the masses, giving the tools that realtors have to the regular person, without having to go through the classes and experiences. So I would say that as far as a consulting company goes, the kind of when you think of the difference between like a realtor and a real estate consultant, there's not that much of a difference. Like, so what I'm trying to do is combining both of those things, like that consultancy and the agent experience into the platform.
Yeah. Well, definitely a podcast number 2 for sure on that when it's ready to launch. But yeah, any other closing comments?
No, this was good. Just overall, I think it's important to kind of grow connections, and especially in like the Filipino community. What I've been noticing is a lot of people, of our parents' generation, they stayed very close because of, like church in the Filipino community. Unfortunately, people are getting away from that, but there has to be a way for people to stay connected with their culture. Yeah. And at the same time, give back to the overall community. And I think kind of just sharing stories is part of that.
Yeah. Okay. It's definitely the theme of the podcast for sure, is everybody's sharing their personal stories, but it's also get to where they are today. So thank you so much for taking the time. I know how busy that we both can get, but the fact that you were able to sit down with me and actually get this off the ground, it took us a while, I think, to get here. I'm glad that we could settle on today, on this morning. But last rounds.
I think we covered all right already.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for listening. This is Auxano. My friends, as always, the grass is greener where you water. It's not on the other side of the fence. My friends, be well and walk tall. Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother.
Of course.
It's a pleasure.
You too, bro. You too. Thank you for taking the time. Yeah. Recording done. Yeah, over and out.